It was a chilly autumn morning that day. Leaves were scattered along the sidewalks, and the sky frowned a dreary gray. The last signs of summer disappeared with the dulling of the red, orange, and yellow leaves on the sidewalks, like the sun being sucked away, shrinking away from the cold and making room for the winter. I longed for something new, something bright, something warm. The cold cut like a knife through my coat and slithered its way under my scarf. Even though I did not have any morning classes, I insisted on waking up early anyway. I thought that I could use the quiet of the sleepy town where I used to write. But whenever I sat down somewhere and put my frozen fingers to the keys, nothing came. I needed inspiration. But despite the silence that filled the empty streets, my brain could not utter a word to fill it up. I crunched through the leaf-filled streets, clutching my bag and my scarf. I needed a change. And as I neared my usual morning coffee shop, I smelled something different. Cinnamon, hazelnut, and cocoa powder. I felt it. Warmth, comfort, kindness. Something new. I stopped in my tracks and turned to where the smell permeated from. A new coffee shop sat there, a block or so from the one I usually frequented. It was nestled in a cozy nook, pushed back a little further than the rest of the shops on the street. Warm amber light flooded from its wide windows and the door was invitingly propped open. The fragrant odor that at first captured my attention wafted out from the front door and into my nose. I swallowed hard. It was exactly what I was looking for. A new place where I could warm my hands and hopefully resurrect my creative spirit. Stepping into the warmth of the coffee shop, I had not a second thought or doubt in my mind. I knew that this was where I was meant to be. The inside of the coffee shop was warm and bright. Tables filled the room, and it had a cute wooden coffee bar stationed at the back of it. Even though it was warm, the coffee shop was surprisingly empty. Where was everyone? Wasn't that early, was it? I looked at the fall decoration covering every table and surface. Pumpkins and leaves and acorns displayed just for the season. But despite the mass amount of fun seasonal decor, there was still no people. I stepped up to the coffee bar, leaning against the counter curiously. "Hello!" A head popped up suddenly from the other side of the counter, startling me. Tender yet piercing green eyes stared back at me, surprised by my sudden reaction. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." The guy laughed and my shoulders instantly relaxed. "It's fine, I'm fine." The guy's long messy brown hair fell onto his face and he tucked a strand of it behind his ear. He smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg, and he radiated the same warmth that had first drawn me into the shop. The apron he was wearing was wrinkled, and he pressed the wrinkles out before placing his delicate-looking hands on the counter. A name tag was pinned to his apron. It read, Theo. "So, what can I get for you?" Simple black coffee." "Heh, a black coffee? Let me guess, you are tired, uninspired, and possibly depressed?" "Hey, don't call me out like that!" "Did I get it right?" Yeah, I don't want him to be right. But considering my character, I think my character is probably depressed at this point. I knew it. Haha. No offense, of course. He punched my order in on the register and I handed him my money. "Yeah, I'll have it served up in a moment." "Thanks." The bright-eyed man retreated into the cafe's mini-kitchen and started rummaging through the cupboards, banging around cups and utensils as he went along. Despite his slightly rude remarks, he was still very charming, and it took me a few minutes to snap back to reality and there goes gravity and find myself a seat in the shop. I picked a table near one of the main windows that had a clear view of the cloudy sky and the street. Finally, I placed my laptop on the table and opened it up. This had to be it. This had to be the place where I could finally write something. Placing my hands to the keys, I hovered over them, hoping for a spark of inspiration to... "Order up!" The grinning barista sets a mug of fresh, hot, black coffee down on the table and beamed at me. The cup of coffee smelled wonderful, whisking away my slight irritation and instead turning it into joy. Cracking a smile, I took a hold of the mug in my chilled hands. I took a sip and my mouth was instantly flooded with warmth and feeling. What sort of feeling, though? It was bitter, just the way I liked it. But there was something more. Something about it that I couldn't quite grasp. Something wonderful. Oh, no, I thought you were getting sleepy from the coffee. Theo made his way back behind the counter, and as he left, I again smelt the warm, homely scents that clung to his sweater. A burning feeling spread in my face and in my heart. Setting down the cup of coffee, I turned back to my laptop, fingers finally ready to type. I began. After a couple of hours of non-stop writing and a half-dozen cups of coffee, I finally retracted my hand to my laptop and sat back in my chair. Staring back at me on my computer screen was several pages of unedited, real writing. I shook, possibly from sheer excitement or from the mass amount of caffeine I had just ingested. You only had 1 cup of coffee! What do you mean mass amounts of caffeine? I had finally found it. At last! My inspiration! I looked over at the barista, Theo, who was still puttering about in the mini kitchen. Surprisingly, no other customer had entered the shop in hours since I had arrived, so Theo looked to be trying to find anything in the kitchen that would keep him busy. I stood up in a daze and walked over to the counter, hoping to share my great news with another human being. Placing both hands on the counter, I peered behind it and into the mini coffee shop kitchen where Theo was now crouched. He removed a piping hot cookie tray from the oven. Delicious looking cookies placed evenly in rows on its shining surface. I sat in awe at the scene before me. Huh? Theo turned, noticing my eyes glued to the cookies. His surprised face turned into a small smile. You want some? He taunted me by waving the baking tray around a little as he removed it from the oven. My eyes followed as he moved it back and forth. Yes? Theo stood up and set a tray of cookies over on one of the kitchen counters next to the oven. Almost forgetting completely about my accomplishment, I stood there patiently at the counter like a dog. I watched as he scraped the cookie from one by one from the tray and pushed them onto a ceramic plate. Here they are. He placed a plate full of cookies down the counter in front of me, and I stared on, mouth salivating. Now, you don't just have to stare at them. Try some. He nudged the plate closer towards me, and I reached a hand out and grabbed one. They were delicious. I pushed one cookie after another into my mouth before Theo politely blocked my returning hand from mindlessly reaching for another one. Okay, they may be good, but not that good. He tugged the plate over in front of himself, picked up a cookie near the edge of the plate, and bit into it. Damn, these are good. He set the half-eaten cookie back onto the plate and pulled it back behind the counter. I don't think that's sanitary. I'm going to have to make more of these. I stared at him in a daze. I don't think the health and safety inspector is going to appreciate that, but whatever. With the morning light filtering in from the windows and the orange overhead shop light shining down on him, he practically glowed. I felt rejuvenated, invigorated. I felt like I, myself, was also glowing. I felt the urge to run, to sing, to dance, to write. I had found my inspiration. Is Theo my inspiration? Turning back to my table and settling down on my laptop, I once again pressed my leaping fingers to the keys. I felt like I could write, and write, and write, until my body grew heavy and I was forced into a sweet and artificial sleep. Why am I in the woods? When I regained consciousness, it was dark, and it was cold. I could hear the coos of birds and chirps of crickets, forest sounds. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I found that I was in the forest. How had I gotten here? My hands grasped wet mud, and I pulled myself up with great effort. The forest around me seemed to stretch on forever. I had seen the forest all the time. It surrounded our small town, but never noticed how big it was until I was now thrust into its evergreen expanse. I spun around and around, trying to gather my bearings, but to no avail. Crunch. I heard something. Something. From somewhere. But where exactly? I felt like an animal, wide-eyed and terrified in the dark. I was frozen in place, listening, waiting. Crunch. Again, I heard it. Closer. I spun to face where I believed the sound to be coming from, but I saw nothing. Nothing except a dark shape among all the other dark shapes of the forest. I squinted, but it was already upon me. Shink. A gust of air blew through my messy hair and something heavy hit the muddy ground next to me. I jumped back, terrified, and when the shadowed figure turned, its piercing green eyes tore into mine. Theo stood there, slicked in a cold sweat that was illuminated by the moonlight, now beginning to filter through the pines. In his hands, he clutched an axe, the blade lodged in the mud where it had been only inches from seconds before. He grinned a toothy, sly grin, not the kind of soft smile he had previously flaunted. The sweet smile that I'd seen previously was now invaded with a devilish glee. Is this because I ate too many of your cookies? A joy that he now seemed to be getting from my fear. Seeing the axe in his hands, I immediately took off running. Where are you going? Theo called out after me in the darkness of the woods. I blindly ran, feeling my way through the darkness, trying not to run into the thick trunks of trees or into thorny berry bushes. Theo approached rapidly from behind, pushing through the shrubbery and stomping through the dark forest mud in his leather boots. What was he doing? Is he trying to kill me? Why? Is it because of the cookies? I grasped onto the trunks of the trees and pulled myself through the darkness. Was I about to die? I weaved between a few wide pine trees, putting a good chunk of distance between me and him. I had to get away. I just had to get away from him. Ugh! Suddenly, my foot caught on a root and I was catapulted face first into the muddy ground. I lay there, unmoving, and prayed that he would not simply see me and pass by. Crunch, 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 crunch. He's near. I couldn't breathe. I could hear him. He was so close. There was nothing I could do. Crunch, crunch. Gah! I was yanked up by my hair and out of the mud, face to face with my hunter, who just a few hours ago had been my inspiration. Found you, he grinned, the scar on his lip curling as he pulled my head up. I writhed and wriggled, struggling against his seemingly iron grip. Did I not put enough of those stuff in your cookies or what? He tilted his head and peered into my wide eyes that were filled with terror. Carelessly tossing me back into the mud, he then stood over me. His now muddied axe was clasped in both of his hands, the shining blade glittering under the thick of muck. He pulled it up over his head, ready to bring it down at a moment's notice. Well, it's just too bad. Dying at the hands of your inspiration. The one you so dearly craved. Maybe that's a little ironic. Maybe a little touching. I shook. I couldn't get up. I was terrified. But nonetheless, I'm glad to have been the only splash of sweetness in your dull, depressing life. He smiled. I screamed. The axe was brought down on my head. Again, and again, and again, and again. Until all inspiration was ground out of my head, and my blood pooled dark in the mud, almost like black coffee. The end. Is it just because I, was depressed when I came in? That was the only choice I had. I was depressed. What? Anyway, that was the writer's Muse. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys do want to play this for yourselves, link to the game will be in the description below. Literally, even if you said no, he still, freaking, goes at you with the axe, and I'm just, is there going to be more to the story? I would love to, I would love to see more. Really, I think that it was a fairly interesting premise. It was a bit sudden, which I kind of understand considering this was made for a game jam. But otherwise, I would honestly want to see more. Please, developer, please come up with more. I'd really like to see more of Theo. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day. And as always, I'll be seeing you in the next video. This is Lion signing off. Ciao.